We are back with another episode of Dynasty Decisions, breaking down your fantasy football teams, trades, rookie picks, rebuilding, contending, all that stuff that we cover over here. You guys know what we're doing. This is 122 episodes deep now. We got 7 teams that we're going to go through. All of them are Flock Fantasy subscribers. Again, if you want to skip the line, mother flockers, do that. Sign up over on Flock Fantasy using only the promo code FSE, and you will get to skip the line on these episodes. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the first team.
All right, so the first submission of the video actually comes from Seth, and he just outlines here, hey, I appreciate the content and looking forward to you for reviewing this team. And I believe we have done a couple of reviews for Seth before, but specifically for this league, he does state here, 16 team start 7 league, no super flex. We'll keep that in mind on 1 quarterback league, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex setup. Pretty bare bones type of roster lineup setup setting. So you have at quarterback here, Jared Goff, Drake May. Keep in mind, again, 1 quarterback league. Running backs, Christian McCaffrey, David Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Audric Estime, Khalil Herbert, Isaac Guerrero. Wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, Rashee Rice, Jerry Jeudy, and Curtis Samuel. And tight end, of course, you have Sam Laporta. And when I'm looking at this team, you have all of your future picks in town there with that late projected 2025 one, with all of your picks in your 2026 draft. And I'm looking at this team in a 16-team league with a shallow starting lineup. I mean, you're putting some absolute firepower onto the field there with whether it's Jared Goff, at least for the early portion of the year, possibly all year, or maybe Drake May at the end portion. I feel like you have good stability at the quarterback position. And when you're looking at specifically with the flexes and the tight end position, Sam Laporta is a guy that is going off the board as a top 2 overall redraft tight end and is the number 1 overall tight end in Dynasty. And then a wide receiver and running back, McCaffrey, 101 candidate. A.J. Brown, first-round pick. Jalen Waddle, second-round pick. DK Metcalf, third-round pick. David Montgomery, yeah, he's a little bit weaker comparatively at the running back 2 position, but for a running back 2 that is still going in the 7th round of underdog drafts, for a guy that is still a player on the Detroit Lions, a team that wants to run the ball in the red zone, a team that has had great success running the ball in the red zone. I'm just looking at this lineup, and I don't think that there's many weaknesses in a 16-team league.
Yeah, and he mentions it says standard there, but he does mention it's a half bonus for first downs for rushing and receiving. I will say too, like if it was a bog standard league or whatever, like A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Metcalf, those are the type of guys that are touchdown scoring wide receivers as opposed to PPR guys. So those are the type of dudes that you'd obviously want to have. And then, I mean, David Montgomery, first down, touchdown, like that's all he does. He's actually quite valuable in this type of format. He mentions too, like he's trying to shop his late projected 2025 first so that he can maybe secure a quarterback upgrade, maybe secure more firepower running back or wide receiver. Hasn't gotten any bites so far because I think people recognize in a 16-team league, he probably has one of the better formats, or one of the better teams, especially in best ball too. You got a couple guys there like Jeudy and Curtis Samuel. It's like, do you love those guys in a managed league when you have to decide to start them? No, but are they going to have a couple weeks here and there? Definitely would. And then he does have a couple deals that he's done and one on the table currently. He said quarterback is definitely the weakness of his team. So again, maybe he's looking to upgrade there. He said he has an offer on the table of Rashee Rice, Javonte Williams, and Audric Estime for Saquon Barkley. He said with this small of a lineup, he feels like it's a smash, but wanted our thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on that trade? I think given the start 7 format, like I think I like the firepower of Saquon as standard where you get bonuses for first downs. Like Saquon's going to be a horse there.
Yeah, exactly. If this was a start 9, start 10 league, you can make the case, 16 teams, start 9, start 10. Maybe you want to hold on to some of your depth, but I'm assuming that there is a lot of value still even on the waiver wire. Despite it being a 16-team league, I'm assuming with the start 7, the overall benches in this format are probably like 10, 15-man benches. Like I'd be shocked if it was a start 7 lineup and you had a 25-man bench. So overall, when it's a shallower bench, when it's a shallower starting lineup as a whole, you want to consolidate any chance you get, even with it being a 16-team league. So for me personally, getting Saquon Barkley, a guy that we have valued as a mid-second round pick in fantasy right now, a guy that lands on the Philadelphia Eagles, has a lot more touchdown equity than he's had in these last couple of years with the New York Giants. I just think it's a smash because, like I said, I thought, David Montgomery is a solid RB2, but you add Saquon Barkley and now a guy like David Montgomery as your RB3. You get off some of the uncertainty there with Javonte Williams. I really like Audric Estime as well, but if you're telling me I have to throw him in on top of Rashee Rice and Javonte Williams to get Saquon Barkley, I'm doing it every single time in your spot.
Yeah, he got Jared Goff, Curtis Samuel in the 301 for Cortland Sutton, 215. Again, 301, 215, same shit. And then his
Yeah.
2025 second. I think that's good knowing that you needed a quarterback upgrade there. And then he also made a number of other trades here. Watson, Elijah Moore, and a third for DK Metcalf. Again, great move in a start 7 format. Consolidate those assets for guys that aren't even difference makers, too, like Watson, Elijah Moore. I guess in best ball, maybe they're interesting, but for the most part, not difference makers. Jake Ferguson, Spencer Rattler at the 315. Again, you didn't really need Ferguson. You already had Laporta. I don't know if he just listed his major guys there. I hope you don't just have Sam Laporta, because obviously in a best ball format, you are going to maybe want to have another tight end or two to contribute. But getting Rashee Rice for that, I think, was good. Obviously, this probably came around the time that all the news started breaking about him. Ramondre Stevenson, you sold off for Javonte, and the 201 Drake May there. I think, again, I like Ramondre, especially in the format that you're in right now, where you can get points for first downs, and the fact that it's a standard, no PPR. He's better, obviously, as a running back. But Javonte, who you then turn into Barkley, or you could turn into Barkley here, and then also the 201 Drake May to give you some upside at quarterback. I think that makes perfect sense, to be honest. I don't think it's like a smash deal by any means, but I think it's a solid move.
Yeah, and like Corey said, maybe you do have some other players on the team that you haven't listed because, maybe they're fodder pieces, maybe they're just depth, maybe you wanted to focus on the starting lineup. But I am curious. Let us know how many overall bench spots there are in this league. Because, again, because you didn't list too many players, I'm assuming that there's probably only a couple stragglers on your roster. Hence, there's probably like 10, 12 bench spots in this league. But I am curious, if you're watching this video, comment down below.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think you're in a pretty good spot. If you want to sell your first, you could maybe do it now. You could do it during the season. I think it would make a lot of sense. I don't really think you need to do it for a quarterback upgrade. I think Goff and May in a best ball,
I would say wide receiver depth.
Fine.
I would say wide receiver depth. So let's just assume you're making that Rashee Rice, Javonte.
Right, but you got to remember, it's a standard league and a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So you're not really needing wide receiver firepower the way that me and you need it in the leagues that we play in.
Yeah, no, that is fair. It's a standard league, so yeah. I mean, I would just hold it honestly then for leverage and kind of see what happens in season.
Yeah, like if somebody, like in week 3, if somebody's getting out to a slow start or whatever, and you can buy them for a first at that point, then definitely make a move. But for the most part, I think you're pretty well set up. So we could probably move on to the next team here, which is from RynBrolo, 12-team PPR, best ball, 6 point per passing touchdown. Tight end premium as well. Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, Derek Carr as the major quarterbacks. Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, Zach Charbonnet, and others as the major running backs. He also took Jonathan Brooks later in his rookie draft there. Drake London, DK Metcalf, Godwin, Khalil Shakir, and others there, with Ricky Pearsall and Roman Wilson as the rookie draft additions mainly. And then Sam Laporta, Cade Otton, Jatavian Sanders, and others at tight end. Again, he mentions that he had his rookie draft like recently. It looks like it took place like in the middle of July or whatever. Also mentions there's like 0.5 for rushing and receiving first downs, 0.2 per carry, 0.1 points for special team return yards, which is an interesting wrinkle here. So a lot of interesting scoring formats. He does mention that he found these guys in the Flock Discord across multiple communities. So I guess some guys maybe in our community, some guys in Mason's community, some guys in the land community, the domain community or whatever. That's a cool feature, I think, of our Discord, obviously, is that you get access to a number of different other degens from different communities. He said the rest of, and then he basically outlines his rookie draft strategy. So what are your thoughts on his team and kind of what he outlines here, what he did in the rookie draft?
Yeah, so obviously it's clear, Superflex start 12, the fact that you have Anthony Richardson and Jordan Love, both guys that we like on that 1-2 turn. I'm assuming you probably had the 1-2 turn. Again, you don't have it specified here. It is a start 13 league. You don't have it specified here if this was a startup, right? That just happened?
Yeah, he said the startup took place in March.
7, 13, here. 14. Yeah, sorry, my apologies. Yeah, okay. So I'm assuming you probably picked at the back end of the first. You got Anthony Richardson and Jordan Love, very, very strong at the quarterback positions. Derek Carr, fine filler quarterback 3. Again, not somebody that you're overly excited about, but also probably somebody you got at a decent value in the draft, maybe 9th, 10th round to fill that QB3 slot. I think that's solid. Running back there, you went with kind of a opportunity cost type approach here. I'm assuming you probably waited. The only real guy of note that has a ton of value in terms of startup value right now where he's going would be Kenneth Walker. Obviously, you do end up spending the 111 on Jonathan Brooks. I'm assuming that was probably your strategy. 111 probably slips a little bit. Jonathan Brooks, he's a guy that you wanted to anchor your running back core. I like that as well. And then in terms of the wide receivers, again, a lot of young youth at the top there. Drake London, DK Metcalf. Again, I guess he's getting older now. He's going to be 27 this year, which is crazy to think about. You think of DK Metcalf as this young wide receiver, but he's actually an in-prime wide receiver. Overall, when I'm looking at this team, you should be in line to compete in year one. I'm assuming there's not going to be too many monsters in your league. It really just depends on how fast-track Jonathan Brooks is coming back from that ACL injury, because guess what? If he's back, 18, 20 opportunities per game by week 3, week 4. This is a team that I definitely think can make some noise.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is the type of team where you kind of wait and see where you're at, because he mentions like this is just a startup. There's no clear front runners. There's only one team really that like really tore it down during the startup. So for the most part, this is the type of team where everybody thinks they're in it, and you kind of need to evaluate during the season if you are or not. In a best ball format, I think you have a lot of guys late that can provide spike weeks. Like, is Jacoby Myers exciting from a redraft standpoint? Not really, but in a best ball format, he's fine. Like Derek Carr, he's fine in a best ball format. Khalil Shakir, those type of guys are fine in best ball formats. He does end up making a trade a couple weeks ago to sell off Khalil Shakir, so it doesn't look like he updated this since then. He sells off Khalil Shakir in the 309, which became Audric Estime, and he gets marvin Mims and Rashid Shaheed. And he mentioned some of his rationales. He's just higher on both players. Fine. You like marvin Mims, you like Rashid Shaheed. He also mentions that both of them in the special teams return yardage format might be their team's returners too. Marvin Mims and Rashid Shaheed both have some upside to do that on special teams.
$10 is classic.
And of course, yeah, the $10 fab is a classic RynBrolo for anybody who's played in a league with him. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that trade. I personally prefer Shakir to those guys in Dynasty, but Shaheed is probably pretty close by there. And I think given the format, Mims and Shakir have some upside.
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking just their underdog ADP right now, and then also at the end, you're adding some of the return value. Like you're looking at a Shakir, a 10th round overall underdog pick right now. Audric Estime, again, I think he's a guy that's going to rise, but right now he's a guy that's going
rounder at some point.
At this point, though, he's like a 17th, 18th rounder, but I do agree with you that he will rise. Same thing. I mean, Rashid Shaheed, 11th round? He's
like right after Shakir, and then Mims right after probably Shakir. Mims goes about where I think Estime will settle, basically an underdog ADP. And if you like Mims and you think he can be the wide receiver 2 there, that's fine. I just personally think it'll be Franklin. He mentions I don't think it'll be Franklin, but I personally think it will be. So, that's a fine move. I think so far with this team, like you're in a pretty good spot. You just kind of need to wait and see how things play out for you. Like I don't think there's much else that I would go about doing. Again, if mid-season comes and your team isn't performing, you want to sell Metcalf off because he's having a great season, or sell Godwin off because he's bouncing back. Sell Kenneth Walker off because he's having an okay start to the year like he was last year. I think those moves are all kind of within your wheelhouse there. This is the type of team where you could kind of go in either direction. I wouldn't be very likely to just like throw my chips into the middle with this team, but I also don't think you need to like tear this down either.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head with your own assessment here. He says, would it be wise to try and rebuild while keeping most of my rookies, or should I hold an assessment season? I do think the latter would be how I play this team. I think it would be a little premature to just tear this thing down, because I do think that with the young guys that you have on this team, with some of the point equity you have on this team, and with knowing the knowledge that this is a new startup, I honestly think this is a team that, sure. Is it a team that you look at and you think, that is by far the highest potential team for 2024? Probably not, because you do have youth mix in there. Like I'm assuming there's some guys in that league that went ultra win now, maybe like has Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, guys like that with more point equity in year one. But you put yourself in a position where you have enough point equity on your team to be able to combat some of the better teams in your league, but you also have all of your futures in deck. Not to mention, again, even if you don't hypothetically go all in year one, this is a team that should start peaking by year 2, to be honest, knowing some of the young talent that you have on this team. He also lists here, I have a decent head on my shoulders. Now, no, we've played with you. We know you know what you're doing. He also says, I don't want to go all in at this point, but I would consider it if this team starts to hit. And like I just said, I think that's the perfect way to play it. Let your team tell you when you want to go all in or whether you want to scrap over some parts. Again, if your team's telling you it's starting off bad, 2-5, and you're not competing with some of the top teams, then at that point, Corey mentioned a guy like DK Metcalf would have a lot of value on the open market. Maybe Chris Godwin bounces back. I wouldn't be selling, like Drake London, or like if we're looking down like Ricky Pearsall, like some of the younger guys. But if your team isn't showing you signs right off the bat, I would be more interested in selling. Again, DK, older than I expected. He's going to be 27 in December. Chris Godwin, even older than that, not to mention a guy that hasn't really looked like that peak Chris Godwin that we saw from a few years ago. So I don't really feel like the market is going to hold him in a highlight if he has a disappointing year this year. So I would want to get out.
Yeah, and send me some better offers than no flocking, and maybe I'll buy Devon Achane off of you, because the Brian Thomas, Jonathan Brooks, a first and a second for Devon Achane and T. Higgins deal wasn't really doing it for me. So that was the offer he sent me. He's
Wait,
like,
what was it? Sorry.
he wanted Brian Thomas, Jonathan Brooks, my first and second for Devon Achane and T. Higgins. To me, I thought that was a little bit outrageous. I think he threw like a fourth rounder in there on my side.
Ryan, that's a little ambitious, Ryan. Let's settle down.
Yeah, I mean, Brooks and Achane are like a second rounder of difference, maybe a little bit more than that if you're huge on Achane like we are. And then Higgins and Thomas, like I have Higgins over Thomas straight up. Like you probably don't, but I do. So let's move on to Josh Slaats' team here, which is also kind of another OG here. 12 team PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, super flex format, half tight end premium. He just had the startup by the looks of it. He said there was 9 sharp players, 3 kind of newbies with redraft mindsets. And he said by the 4th round, it was pretty obvious that 10 teams were drafting win now builds. Fucking absolutely genius scouting of your draft room, Josh. Noticing that 10 teams in your league by the 4th round are all going redraft centric. That is exactly what we talk about in draft strategy videos.
Yes.
Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, Michael Penix is the team there. Jonathan Brooks, Charbonnet, Tyrone Tracy, a bunch of 0 RB guys at running back. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jermaine Burton, Demario Douglas, old young wide receiver core there. And then the duo of Packers tight ends. Guess you're hoping you just get it right there. And then a lot of picks, 3 1s in 2025, 4 2s in 2025, a couple extra 3s. And then it doesn't look like he has his 26 too. But for the most part, very well constructed team, good young assets.
I'm Team Kraft over Musgrave, but if you're telling me right now that obviously, again, there's still the chance that Musgrave could end up being the tight end 1. Overall, just locking up the potential Packers tight end 1 at 13th and 16th round opportunity cost. Again, you guys know my thoughts on Jordan Love. I think this offense is going to be one of the better, more improved offenses in the entire league, possibly a top 5 to top 8 overall offense. So locking down the Packers tight end 1, again, we don't quite know who it's going to be at this point. Me and Corey tend to favor Tucker Kraft. I know a lot of you guys out there also prefer Luke Musgrave. Basically locking in one of those guys in a window where you have 3 2025 ones, where you have a lot of young appreciating talent on your team. I think you played that right, man, because honestly, you didn't overpay for either of them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the possibility that they're both equally talented and they're like a 50-50 timeshare and you kind of don't have a starting tight end. But at the same time, you're hoping that one of these guys emerges or whatever the case is. Like maybe it's a situation where like, Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst in early in their career, we saw Andrews emerge, but Hayden Hurst still had value when he moved on to different teams and things of that nature.
It's like a top 6 tight end in value when he moved to the Falcons. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that. So yeah, that would be your best case scenario in that situation. But anyways, he said, I left the draft with the most future picks and only competing with one other tanking team at this time. He said, grade my draft and let me know how you would address this season leading up to 2025, as well as, he has a lot of trades listed here. So I think you did a really good job of your draft. I love how you really recognized right away exactly what the strategy you were employing were going to be, because again, me and Danny don't go into like startups thinking we're going to do one thing or another. We evaluate on the clock. It's the reason that I find it hard to click the button on like Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey in round 3, because I don't want to make up my mind about what I'm doing that early in my draft. I would rather take a slightly younger option who has a chance to fit both a rebuild or a contending build. And then by round 4 or 5, like you kind of made a reference to there, I kind of know how my league mates are drafting at that point in time. There's probably 2 or 3 guys that are collecting picks. There's probably 8 or 9 guys drafting win now guys. And that's when you make the determination to go one way or another. So I think you did a great job on that. I'd say you probably, given that you made that assessment and you collected what you were looking for, it's like an A+ draft.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's a very similar scenario to what I ended up doing, for example, in our flocked up league that we did this year, where I didn't know going into that draft that I would be, spending some of my future picks trying to develop some win now talent. But after the first couple of rounds, when I noticed that there was literally 3-4 teams that, especially Bailey himself, that were quite literally just selling everything possible, I realized at that point, it's like, okay, well, even if I tank my pick, quote unquote, it doesn't really have a chance to be a top 3, top 4 overall pick. So at this point, it's like, I want to trade it when there's uncertainty where it'll lie, before people catch on like, oh shoot, no, there are 4 legitimately hard down rebuilding teams out of the startup. And that sometimes happens in leagues we're in, because quite frankly, in other leagues, I don't see people tearing it down out of the startup like we do. But at the end of the day, you guys are sharp enough to get us into a win now type of window. That kind of speaks volumes to, you've seen the fruits of our labor in other leagues we've been in and are trying to apply it against us as well.
Yeah, like I win now in that league too. Like my starting lineup literally is players that I never draft because they just fell at value. Like I have Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa as my quarterbacks, Bijan, Kyron Williams as my starting 2 running backs. Drake London, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Josh Jacobs, and all those guys filling out my flex. Like, it's hard for me to click the button on some of those players usually, but they fell to a point because you guys are in our audience and obviously like have shared opinions that we do on some of those guys. Like Tua, for example, I thought fell at an amazing value. Like, I'm not a huge Tua guy, but he's going to get an extension here soon. And I had him stacked up with Jalen Waddle at like a 4th or a mid 5th or something. I can't remember exactly where I got Tua, but it was pretty crazy how far he fell. It's just that we don't usually hype up Tua, so people weren't really excited about him.
Yeah, pretty much exactly. So, I mean, going back to your point, Sharp, like Corey said, adapting to the draft room you're in, a lot of people will say, oh, I know all these draft strategies. I know, how to win now. I know how to, 1 year punt out of a startup, but they predetermine what they're going to do. So being able to adapt on the fly, again, it's always good to have a overall startup strategy going in, but being able to adapt based off the overall actions of your league mates is how do you separate a good dynasty player from a potentially great dynasty player.
Yeah, no, exactly. And looking at some of the startup trades you made, we can kind of just skim through these. I think trading up 2 spots from Caleb to Lamar, giving up just an 8th for a 9th round swap, super sharp move there. As much as I love Caleb, like Lamar is more valuable for sure. 509 and 709. Again, crazy that Drake May was the 509, given that your build was kind of, not a win now build. I might have stayed put there, but getting the 609 and a 1st and 2nd is a pretty enticing package to move off of it. So I kind of do understand why you made this move.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just taking the picks and you didn't see that it was May, you didn't see that it was Reed, you didn't see that it was Brooks. 609 plus a 25 1st and 2nd for the 509 and the 709. Process-wise, you do that move every time. The problem is that this league let Drake May fall to the 509. And
he said he made this deal like on the clock, I'm pretty sure. He said, I made the trade at 509 when I decided to go with a 1 year punt. He said this is the deal he doesn't feel the greatest about of the deals that he made so far.
Yeah, no, and I do agree. I just value Drake May way above the 509. So even with you having Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson, if Drake May fell to me at the 509, I'd be thanking my league mates, taking him and potentially selling Jared Goff in season.
Yeah, it's actually pretty crazy to know that you could have ended up with both Caleb Williams and Drake May. That would have fit your build a little bit better. But at the same time, like I'm not going to fault you for the Lamar Jackson move. That was like super, super sharp. The other move that you made, I don't know how you got a 1st round pick in the double-digit rounds. That's super hard to do in a startup, but that's great move by you. 1109 for 1702 in a 2nd. Again, you're moving down a couple spots. You still got players in the 17th round that are like not even that far off in value from Tony Pollard. So I think that's probably fine. And then Evan Ingram in the 907 spot, you trade back to the 1206 and you get a 2nd rounder there. So yeah, trading back, collecting picks. You were obviously very active during this one. I think you did a great job, man. Like, I think this is a really sharp build. I think that, obviously this year you're not going to be competitive, but you have young players that are going to be developing. And then come 2025, man, look out. Unfortunately, your tight end position may be in flux if none of these guys emerge, but I think you should be pretty set. Like, Michael Penix was a perfect fit for this build. I think that was a sharp pick. I think having all these picks to add, we know how the 2025 class looks. It's all running backs and wide receivers right now. Being able to add those position players, specifically potentially at running back, are going to be really, really crucial for you if you can get a high pick.
Yeah, 100%. And then obviously, again, I'm not sure if you referenced the Evan Ingram trade, another sharp deal.
I did.
Move down. Okay, fair. Yeah, I was going to just say 907 to 1206, pocketing a 2nd, sharp move. I mean, at the end of the day, you've submitted a good amount of times. We know you have a good head on your shoulders. Obviously, again, we're happy to go through all these submissions. But at the end of the day, I mean, you know what you're doing. You crushed a startup. You did exactly what you wanted to. You literally said here, I won and lost some deals overall, but overall accomplished my goal. That is what you need to reflect on once you have a startup. Again, you can, debate and choose. Did it go exactly the way I wanted? Did it not go exactly the way I wanted? Because sometimes in leagues you're in, you'll draft with some guys and you'll be like, oh my God, like I smashed every value. I feel so good about this draft. And then you'll draft with some, sharper players like you mentioned in this league and be like, ooh, like I like where I picked these guys, but I kind of had to take them above where I wanted to because otherwise I wasn't going to get them. So ultimately, the way you played this draft, the way you accomplished what you wanted to, getting those future 2025 ones, understanding the league dynamic, being able to adapt on the fly, again, I think you played it right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you did a really good job. Let's move to the next team here, which is from Arthur, 10 team standard. Again, I think he has some points for 1st downs and rushing and receiving. I guess this is the 1st down rushing and receiving video of the offseason.
And best ball.
Superflex. Yeah, Superflex best ball as well, he says listed here. we got, or sorry, this league is not best ball. You're referring to
No,
other ones. Anyways,
the other ones, yeah.
Richardson, Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins as his quarterbacks, Achane, Henry, Brooks, Benson, Chase Brown, Charbonnet, Wright, very deep at running back, Waddle, Pittman, Rome, Rice, Worthy, Pearsall, Dubs, McBride, Dulcich, Juwan Johnson, and others there. And looks like still has banked up capital on top of that. Again, I get it's a 10-team league, but this is a really well-constructed team in terms of like your overall stud factor. I mean, you got one stud running back with a lot of good depth, a lot of upside there as well with Brooks and Benson. You have two absolute first-round startup pick quarterbacks. You have Jalen Waddle, Pittman, Rome. Again, you're a little bit lighter at wide receiver, but there's a lot of upside to accumulate value there as well with Rome and with Worthy and with Rice. And then you have a stud, positional advantage tight end there in a start 9 league. So really well constructed team. And he does say this is in this format, running back heavy teams usually win for like the half point rushing first down bonus.
Yeah.
Again, I get that it's a standard. There's no PPR, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's why he bought Derrick Henry and prioritized Brooks and Benson in the rookie draft. He said, any other advice in a format like this? I think you pretty much made the right determination. Again, we're not very much in the camp of prioritizing running backs, but there is some, deviations that you can make based on the league scoring format. In a standard league where you get half point bonuses for first downs, like Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, those guys are a lot more valuable in those formats.
There's one glaring player that does not fit that type of scoring setting. If you can get a player valued within the same tier as Michael Pittman's a volume PPR wide receiver. Can you go out and get a big play, touchdown scoring wide receiver that's about in the same valuation? I mean, the one that comes to mind, we just mentioned DK Metcalf in the last video. If you can get DK Metcalf for Michael Pittman, I think that fits your scoring settings even better. Or, just looking at that overall range. Yeah, T. Higgins, like the wide receiver 22 to 28 range, kind of pick your flavor for somebody that is more of if you can get up to
Devontae Smith, you already have Jalen Waddle, guys like that who are not necessarily PPR guys, but they're going to be better efficiency wise. Those guys all really make a lot of sense there. He said these are the draft moves that he made, and he said I was part of a 3-way trade where Stroud got moved, but I sent Purdy in a third for Cousins in the mid first. So he doesn't. I don't think he lists that one there, but yeah, you got Purdy in a third for Cousins in a mid first. I think that was a really good upgrade there. He said, I want more first in 2025 to secure more elite running backs. You already have a very good running back core, so I wouldn't be totally married to the idea that like if you have a low, like I don't know where your firsts are going to end up being, but adding Burden or McMillan or Igbuka, like one of those guys, I'd say Burden and McMillan specifically because they're more big play threats would really make a lot of sense in this type of league format. Going through some of the trades you made, you sell off the 203 JJ McCarthy, which is pretty crazy that he fell to 203 in a 10-team super flex. So I guess what's that, the 201 in a 12-teamer? And you got Rashee Rice and Roman Wilson. I actually would have just stayed put and taken JJ McCarthy there personally.
Yeah. The way I kind of view it again, you could argue 10-team quarterback position devalued as a whole. You want to get some wide receiver help knowing that Rashee Rice is going to be, you have him listed above Worthy, but I would say whether it's him or Worthy, one of them's your wide receiver 4, one of them's your wide receiver 5. You want to add some depth there, but I do feel like because Kirk Cousins is coming off the Achilles tear, because there's some uncertainty in his.
Well, he sold Cousins for Purdy. Remember, he mentioned that he sent Purdy in a third for Cousins in the mid first. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah. So, with knowing that Kirk Cousins is coming off of the Achilles tear, I probably would have taken McCarthy to potentially either A, move at a later date when he was showing promise as a rookie, or B, if Kirk Cousins doesn't look the same, to ensure yourself at the quarterback position. Again, I'm not going to fight it too hard because it is a 10-team start 9. You want maybe some upside at wide receiver. And when Rashee Rice is not dealing with suspension talk, he was a very, very productive rookie receiver, over 900 yards, 7 touchdowns, especially down the stretch. So I understand where you got here. It's just, you're taking a lot of risk by making this move.
Yeah, JJ McCarthy is also like the perfect QB3 for your build because you have Richardson and Caleb Williams. They're young quarterbacks. You're not really totally ready to compete yet, but you do have a competitive range of outcomes in for you because you could, if Henry and all these guys hit, you could be really competitive year one. I definitely would have, like the Cousins move, I don't fault you for that. I think that's decent value to cash out on Purdy, but then I would have just taken McCarthy as my third quarterback and then tried to sell Cousins off for another wide receiver in that situation myself. But again, I'm not going to nitpick it too hard. Spears and Warren, you sent them away. You're not going to find too many guys that are higher on Spears and Warren this year from a redraft perspective than me. 206 and early second in the 402. Again, I think early second in a 10-team league is very enticing. The 206 being Pearsall. Again, I probably wouldn't have taken Pearsall with that pick. I probably would have taken a different receiver that was on the board because I assume 10-team 206, you probably passed on like Leggett or somebody different for Pearsall, and I probably would have went with the other option, but that's fine if you like Ricky Pearsall. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that trade? Because I really like Spears and Warren this year, but I do like the assets that you acquired there.
Yeah, it just feels like a fair deal. You realize, hey, I'm making this move for Derrick Henry on June 7th. I'm getting Derrick Henry and Chase Brown. When you add Derrick Henry and Chase Brown to a room of HM, Brooks, Benson, Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, like you, even Chandler at the bottom there, like you have so many usable running backs on this roster to the point where being able to liquidate Spears and Warren, getting a second round overall pick there with the 206, a first round wide receiver, early projected 2025 second to potentially move at a later date. You just kind of liquidate some of your assets, being able to make a further move in season if you need to. Because quite frankly, if the cost to move up from, I mean, we just mentioned Pittman to Nico Collins. If the cost is to move up from Pittman to Nico Collins, that mid-projected second plus Pittman in exchange for Nico Collins in a 10-team start 9 format, I'd be doing that every single time.
Yeah, I guess the one issue I have with this move is like, as much as I think Henry is definitely a needle mover in this type of league scoring format, I think that Spears and Warren fit your build a little bit better because they're younger running backs. And you also would have kept, more picks as a result of that because you gave away like the 301 and the 308 and shit in the Henry deal. And I mean, I guess you got the 206 back in the Pearsall trade there, but I don't know. For me, I like those guys a lot, and I think face value wise it was a fine trade. I just think they fit your build really well, and especially that you mentioned that you're really high on running backs in general in this format. I personally really love those guys this year, so that would be my only gripe with it. But I mean, overall, the rest of the team, I look at this and you're going to be just a house money team this year. Again, if things are going well, just use the production Derrick Henry gives you. But if things are not going well, then you should probably sell him off. And he's definitely the glaring guy that won't fit your build if your team is not very competitive because Brooks isn't healthy, Benson's not the starter. Some of your guys are just not hitting the way that you want them to. That would be the only real concern that I would have. So, I mean, Henry and Cousins are on potentially sell them if you're not competitive mode. But for the most part, I think this is a team that should be able to compete in this league format.
Yeah, and the last thing I will note from this is that it is kind of funny. He traded away the 206, the 301, and the 308, but he ended up getting the 206 back. So I'm assuming like you made the deal on June 7th, and then a couple days later, he's like, "Hey, like, do you want the 206 back? I'll take Tajay Spears and Jalen Warren off your hands."
Yeah, it's weird because Henry, Chase Brown, Spears, Warren, those are all guys that are like back end RB2s in Dynasty
and a fourth
kind of thing. Yeah, like the two guys that like it was just a swap of back end RB2s in Dynasty between the two of you guys, but you ended up with the better draft picks out of it. So I guess if you look at it that way, it appears to be a pretty solid move. But I think we can move on to the next team, which is from Cameron here. 10 team, also PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown, super flex. Burrow, Goff, McCarthy, Knicks. That's pretty loaded. Mixon, Tajay Spears, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins, and others. Chase, Lamb, St. Brown, Kirk, McConkey, Downs, elite receiving core. Trey McBride, Pat Freiermuth, Hunter Henry, also very good at the tight end position. And he just has like a million late round picks for some reason in 2025, but hell of a team.
Sorry, I just have to say this. First question he has, am I a contender? Brother, when you're rocking a wide receiver core to start 9-10 team league of Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and DeMondre St. Brown with RB production, with quarterbacks, again, Joe Burrow, top 10 option, Jared Goff, top 18 option, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, upside as young assets, Trey McBride as a literal top 3 overall tight end in redraft. Like, brother, if you have to ask, am I a contender? Like, you are. Let's just say you are.
Yeah, and I mean, he mentions like the winner last year has like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Tyreek, Nakua, Kittle. Like they have a great team, but like you're probably the second best team in your league if you think about it that way. And even you might even be able to go toe for toe with this guy because Lamb and St. Brown and Chase and PPR, man, those guys are going to be horses for you at wide receiver. So he says, do I go and trade for Hall? I mean, like what's the cost? Like, can you get Gibbs or Hall or Bijan for like a decent price? Because if all it costs you is a 2025 first round pick, Tajay Spears and Bo Nix to go get Bijan Robinson, like fuck yeah, I'm going to get him.
Yeah, 100%. Again, maybe it's not as cheap as I said, but yeah, like if you can get the first round pick, he wants the third. If somebody said, yeah, I want the first, the third, all your fourths, all your fifths, plus really any non-Chase Lamb Brown.
Just do a Mike Ditka. Sell your whole draft next year for Bijan Robinson. Just sell it all for the Texas running back.
Yeah, I mean that's usually a great strategy. Am I right? No, all jokes aside, in fantasy it actually works. In real life, maybe mortgaging all that for a running back wasn't the sharpest idea. But we're playing a game to win. I mean, you don't care about the longevity of the position. You don't care about potential value on their contract. None of that. You're caring about how many targets, how many total touches, how many total touchdowns that running back's giving you, rather than the actual valuation of taking a running back that high in the draft in real life.
Yeah. So to me, what stands out is you got horses at every position but running back. And running back, to be fair, like you're fine there. You can get by with Mixon and with Javonte and Tajay and those guys. But you want to go buy a horse, that's fine. I'd be totally cool buying a horse with this team. You want to go get Brees, Bijan, or Gibbs. The price that you should be looking to pay is about 2.5 firsts of equivalent value. That would be a good deal. I'd be willing to pay 3 firsts of equivalent value. So whether that's, Bo Nix is worth about a first, your 2025 first is worth a first, and Chase Brown or Tajay Spears, that's about 2.5, 3 firsts of value. I'd be cool paying that if you can get away with it. If you can't get quite to those guys, go after Achane, go after Jonathan Taylor, go after ETN, go after Pacheco. Those guys make a lot of sense as well. Probably want to be paying like 2 firsts or 1.5 firsts respectively for those type of guys.
What would be the most you'd be willing to pay here? McCarthy in a first for Bijan or Hall?
I'd be willing to give up McCarthy in a first for either of those guys.
10 team start 9. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
I'd be willing to give up that.
If that was like a 12 team start 11, I would probably lean the value of the quarterback in the pick. But knowing it's a 10 team start 9, knowing that you have to compete with that type of monster, and quite frankly, it makes no sense to try to accumulate more value in this team, because quite frankly, at the wide receiver position, at the overall top end of your lineup, you're loaded, man. Like, I understand there's another top team in this league, but like I said, you're loaded.
Yeah. And during the rookie draft, it looks like he sold off either Malik Neighbors or Drake May. He doesn't specify who went at 104, but he did say that Caleb, Marvin, and Daniels were off the board when he was up on the board there. Getting JJ McCarthy and McConkey there, if you were going to take a quarterback anyway, potentially, and you don't feel that different about Drake May versus JJ McCarthy, pocketing Ladd McConkey and Demario Douglas in that trade is really, really a nice move for you there. You also have on 510, you trade away the 302, Ricky Pearsall, DJ Chark, Malik Washington in a third. You got Christian Kirk, Josh Downs, J.K. Dobbins in a fourth. I don't know how you did this, dude. I think Christian Kirk might be worth this package himself. So getting Downs and Dobbins on top of that is pretty nice. I'm high on Christian Kirk, but either way, like, I think that was a good move for you. And then you sent away, it looks like 2 seconds, a third, Dallas Goedert and Alec Pierce, and you end up getting Joe Mixon, Audric Estime, and Hunter Henry. I mean, Hunter Henry's kind of an unnecessary acquisition here. I get buying cheap running back production, but 2 twos, a 3, Dallas Goedert, that's not nothing to pay up for like Joe Mixon there. I might have rather gone up for a Pacheco or an ETN or somebody like that.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned cheap production. Like, this isn't cheap. It's 2 twos, it's a 3, it's Dallas Goedert. Again, like, even though Dallas Goedert didn't live up to that potential top 5 overall ceiling that people cited for a bunch of years, like, it's still a clear top 12 to 15 tight end, a guy that probably is worth a late 2, early 3 in his own right. Like, I think Dallas Goedert's valuation is about where Ben Sinnott was going in drafts, give or take.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, bottom line is, when I look at this team, if this was a super flex redraft league, I mean, Burrow, Goff, McCarthy, those guys are all going to be good. All these 0 RB targets are like guys that I'm actively drafting in underdog drafts because I like their outlook this year. Mixon, Spears, Javonte, Chase Brown, Dobbins, Estime, those type of guys. And then, I mean, Chase, Lamb, and Brown are like 3 of my top 5 players in redraft this year. And then Christian Kirk is a solid 4th round pick in underdog drafts right now. McConkey, like a 7th round pick. Downs, I like in the late rounds. And McBride's a top 3 tight end in redraft. So yeah, you're in a really good spot, to be honest. There's not much I would say about this team other than go out and go compete. But again, buy a horse at running back if you can afford one. Brees, Bijan, Gibbs, Achane, somebody like that. Or go cheaper a little bit if you need to. ETN, Pacheco, those type of guys are really good buys as well. James Cook as well, I think, is a half decent buy right now. So if you can buy those guys, go nuts. But if not, I mean, you're probably fine to compete with the team the way that it is currently.
And last thing I will say, obviously, again, like, it depends on how affordable, how open these owners are to moving these players. But I mean, at the end of the day, with that wide receiver core, with that advantage at tight end, with that upside at quarterback, like, the only real running backs I am absolutely targeting are going to be those top 3 guys. And again, you want to be cautious to not overly spend on them. Like, you don't want to just say, hey, I'll give you 2 firsts plus Ladd McConkey plus Bo Nix just to get a running back, because that will put your team at a disadvantage long term. But if the cost is 2 1s plus, I mean, even
selling quarterback and running back equity to get a better running back in addition to your pick capital is the route that I would take. I would not be looking to sell off wide receiver or tight end equity just because you already have good positional stables there. There's no reason to dismantle them. You have an excess of quarterback equity with 4 quarterbacks, right? You have an excess of running back equity with all the depth that you have there. So using picks, quarterback, and running back would make sense.
Yeah, whether it's 2 1s plus Knicks, whether it's 1 1 and 1 3 plus JJ McCarthy, whatever the cost may be. Again, let us know like what those owners are looking for if you want some context on that. But like, I'm doing everything in my power to get one of those top 3 onto my roster if this is my team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we can move on to the next team here, which is from Brandon. He has it listed 12-team PPR lineup format, 4 point per passing touchdown, tight end premium league, super flex as well. Lawrence Levis, Drake May, Bryce Young, Bo Nix. I mean, you got 5 starting quarterbacks there, so that's a good start. Brooks, Benson, Estime, and others at running back. Chase, Higgins, Addison, McConkey, Leggett, and others at wide receiver. And then Greg Dulcich, Tucker Kraft, and others at tight end. Looks like he's got a nice little pick bank worked up there too, an extra first, an extra couple 2s in the future draft classes as well. So, I mean, this is a really well-constructed team. I don't think I have to really say too much about that. He says the tight end premium is not like just simple points. It's actually a 0.75. And he said this is a 5 point per passing touchdown. So having quarterback depth definitely helps you there. He said going into year 2 of the league, so no real monsters yet. I mean, you're getting there for sure. And he said all the mid picks, all the picks are like mid labeled. He said are not my picks, and being a newer league, anything can happen. So they could be mid, they could be late, they could be early is basically what he's saying there. And then he said, what moves would you be looking to make? I mean, clearly the thing that stands out to me is selling off some of the risk you're inheriting at quarterback, because as much as I like Bryce Young, as much as I like Bo Nix, as much as I like Will Levis, you don't need to hold all of those guys because the law of averages dictate that one of those guys is probably going to lose a lot of value and miss. So if you wanted to move off of Levis or Young specifically, I would potentially see what you can get for them. And maybe you could pivot into running back or tight end production where you're a little bit weaker.
He does list here, I've tried moving Levis with no luck yet.
Okay, so then try moving Bryce would be my next.
Yeah, he literally just asked like any moves involving quarterbacks that I should do. And again, that is the route to take. Obviously, it will be tough if you're not getting a lot of bite right now. It's July 24th. If people feel content with their quarterback cores right now, I don't blame them. If you're holding into August, into September, possibly early October, at that point, once injuries start flaring up, once people start realizing, hey, my mid quarterback core isn't going to cut it, and possibly at that point, whether it's Will Levis, potentially showing some of that deep ball prowess he showed at the end of last year, very, very good receiver core, Brian Callen in hand. We believe in Will Levis, but at the same time, it's like if he starts showing out and people are starting to catch on, I wouldn't mind moving it, knowing that you have Trevor Lawrence and Drake May on the roster. Same thing with Bryce Young. Obviously, a muddied situation in his rookie season, but having Dave Canales there, adding in Deontay Johnson, drafting Xavier Leggett, having Jonathan Brooks now, improved offensive line, there's a real case scenario for him potentially, being a mid to back end quarterback too in his second year. And if that's the case, man, like Corey said, if you can get one other productive running back on this team, I think you're in a crazy good spot.
Yeah, I mean, tight end's a little bit of a weakness production-wise. Between Dulcich, Conklin, and Tucker Kraft, and Jonnu Smith, you probably don't have like a solidified dude, but you could probably get by at that position. So, I mean, for me with Levis, Bryce Young, and Bo Nix, if you flipped a coin, one of these guys is going to miss. One of these guys could probably hit to the tune of like Tua or Brock Purdy, and then one of these guys is probably going to be the next Derek Carr. So, like, the question is like, which of these guys is the one that you believe in? Which is the one that you don't believe in? Again, I can make the bull case for all of them. Bo Nix obviously not having a rookie season yet is good news for his value because there's nothing that we have to worry about in terms of what people's preconceived notions are in the NFL so far. But yeah, I would definitely explore trade options with those guys. See if you can get to you probably won't be able to get to like the Pacheco, ETN, James Cook area of running back production, but maybe you have to add some pieces, maybe to get to tight ends like a TJ Hawkinson or something like that. You have to add some pieces there. But for the most part, explore trades with those players. It looks like you made a couple trades here. You sent away Deshaun Watson and got a first and a second on January 16th. That's a great move. You sent away the 101 by the looks of it, and you ended up, giving away another number of other things, and you got Jamar Chase and Bryce Young out of that. I mean, Chase for the 101's a pretty even deal. as we currently see it right now. So you got 211, 304, 307, and Dontavian Wicks for Bryce Young, which I think is good. So it's clear to me that you recognize that you do like these quarterbacks, hence why you bought Drake May and Bryce Young. So that's why you're okay holding them. So if that's your position, again, you're not going to sell them for what you don't think they're worth, then you're going to have to wait until in season to sell them when they're actually proving it on the field, because as of right now, those guys don't have a cult following that is just going to, love them no matter what. With Bryce Young specifically and Will Levis specifically, people are going to need to see it first. So if they all appreciate in value, you're going to have a nice little nutted portfolio of quarterbacks here, but you are probably going to have to inherit some risk if you're okay doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, are those quarterbacks more volatile than a first round pick would be? Absolutely. But also with those quarterbacks, if they do show promise, they have the same value accrual, value appreciation that a first round pick would have. So at that point, it's like you're basically tacking on. You have 2 first rounders in 2025. If a couple of those quarterbacks pay off, just look at it as, oh, I'm getting an extra first, maybe even a first plus. Like if Levis goes out there and he's the quarterback 7 in fantasy and he has 12 passing touchdowns in the first 5 games and he looks like he's on track to win, he's the most improved player in the NFL. Like the guy's going to be worth probably 2 ones.
Yeah, he's going to be right there with Tua and Purdy and Jordan Love.
I think higher, man.
He might be in the
like
Jordan
Trevor
Love,
Lawrence?
Kyler Murray area, Trevor Lawrence range of quarterback rankings, depending on what the other guys are doing. And Ayuk for May, again, given your team construction, I don't like this move, but given the value that I have May way higher than Brandon Ayuk, I do like this move. So again, it looks like you're okay with inheriting these quarterbacks with the intention of kind of selling them off later. But the one thing I will caution you on is it doesn't look like your league mates are really valuing the quarterback position highly. So keep that in mind when you're trying to sell them, is that you might not quite get what you're hoping to out of these guys. But for the most part, I think this is a really well-constructed team. Year 1, you're probably a house money, maybe make some moves during the season. But come year 2, you should be close to, if not already, a monster, given the picks that you have banked up to.
Yep. No, I agree. But overall, I feel like we can move on to the final team of the video, and that's going to be from Jake. So before we quickly get into the team, he does say here, won the championship last year, looking to repeat. And judging from the lineup, I can see why you won the championship.
Yeah, I mean, a 12-team half PPR super flex. Josh Allen and Jordan Love as your main quarterbacks. Bijan and Brees, my RB 1 and 2 in Dynasty, to start that off. Nakua, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, all top 10 receivers for me. Devontae Smith and other depth there. Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins, and others there. You also have George Kittle, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft, a tight end. I think I have a tight end core exactly built the same way with those 4 guys there in one other league. But yeah, very, very well-constructed team. You also somehow have an extra first rounder banked up. Looks like you're playing with a bunch of casuals and you're running some rough shot on them right now. He said any moves that we would make prior to the season. I mean, he says I could definitely use a quarterback 3 and maybe some running back depth. I'm like, yeah, but is Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Bijan, or Brees ever leaving your fucking lineup? The answer is probably no at their given position. So that to me sounds like an issue of when it happens, maybe you go acquire that depth.
Yeah.
Like if Jordan Love goes down for 10 games, then maybe you go acquire quarterback depth to try and compete. But like Najee and those guys are good enough depth to get by if Brees misses a couple games. And I mean, a quarterback 3 is your major issue, but I'm not going to go out of my way to like really spend up on a quarterback 3. I think the best types of quarterback 3s for the build that you have are one of those guys that we just talk about, a Bo Nix, a JJ McCarthy, a Bryce Young, a Will Levis, somebody with upside who you're not probably going to get into your lineup unless you have an injury, but could accumulate a ton of value. But the question is how much do those guys cost? Because if you have to pay up more than like Marquise Brown in a second or something like that, which is what I'd be fine paying for those guys, then I'm probably not going to be willing to give up Devontae Smith just to have a third quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like you just play it by value. Like if you can get one of those guys cheap, you can. The other route you can take is just cheap, quarterback 3 production. Again, I'm assuming a guy like Derek Carr. I just mentioned his name earlier when you were talking. Like I don't think Derek Carr would cost too much, but like what's the cost of Derek Carr realistically? Like if we're looking at his lineup, like I
might even go cheaper than that, man. How much does Russell Wilson or Aiden O'Connell cost you? Honestly, like
Aaron Rodgers,
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. Like just go after somebody really cheap and honestly, don't do it now. There's no point.
Yeah.
Because they're never going to see the light of day in your lineup. It's after, if Josh Allen misses 7 games, that's when you go after Aaron Rodgers or Aiden O'Connell or somebody that gets you by at that point in time. And also too, like I've won dynasty championships having one of my quarterbacks miss significant time, and I've just literally streamed whoever I could find on the waiver wire or used non-quarterback assets in my
Joe Flacco, baby. I lost the championship because Joe Flacco got picked up and put into a lineup, and Yeah, that was bad. So for the record, in this league, I had Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Josh Allen obviously doing his thing. Justin Herbert gets hurt at the end of the year. So when I'm playing in the championship, I had to start. I think it was Barkley in my superflex, and that was when he had a bad game. And my opponent picked up every starting quarterback available. So unless you're in that exact scenario where you got somebody in your league just completely sniping any startable quarterback option from you, that's one thing. But yeah, like overall, again, you should be fine.
I was in a championship last year and I had Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, and Kirk Cousins all down for the year with injuries. And I started Bryce Young and Joe Flacco in the championship and nearly won because the rest of my team was in good shape. So, I mean, quarterback, Josh Allen, Jordan Love, they're going to be horses for you as long as they're in your lineup. They're both guys that I think have league winning quarterback upside, especially Josh Allen having like 25 point per game upside. So yeah, you're in a really good spot there. I wouldn't sweat too much about not having a QB3 unless it comes down to the fact that you actually need to put one in your lineup. The trades that he ended up making on June 2nd, it looks like, is when he probably had his rookie draft, give or take. He sold off a 112 for a future 2025 first. That's generally just a smart process move. Again, as much as Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey or whoever you would have gotten there would have helped you, that definitely makes some sense. I mean, he said BTJ was there at 112. I mean, my question would have been, you could have solved your quarterback 2-3 crisis by taking Bo Nix with that pick if he was on the board. But if he was gone, I guess that makes sense to move. And it is definitely the right process to re-roll that pick. And then he also sold off Kyler Murray and Aaron Jones for Garrett Wilson in the 112 in this initial trade here. So getting Garrett Wilson for Kyler Murray, to me, that's a wash. I think they're about worth the same thing. And I would much rather have the 112 than Aaron Jones. And again, given the strength of your quarterback core, Kyler Murray and Jordan Love, like having both of those guys is a little bit redundant. You don't need both of those guys because you're just going to be playing matchups with those guys anyway.
Garrett Wilson and Kyler Murray are very, very close in terms of valuation, and I would rather have the 112 over Aaron Jones. And again, it's not listed here what you ended up doing with. Oh, you ended up trading in the 112. Okay, so
yeah, he sold the 112, who could have been Brian Thomas Jr. there, but he sold it for a future pick in 2025.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. It's funny because I actually made an inverse move in our Tone Setter Truthers League. To be fair, again, like you have so much depth at wide receiver that getting an extra 2025 one, potentially making a big time consolidation move for you in 2025 makes a lot of sense. But yeah, anytime, the 112 for a future projected, 2025 first. Again, I don't know where that projects to be. You'd say it's a team that will definitely be competitive. Does that mean like it'll be closer to the 109 to 112 range, or is that more so like competitive in the sense that he's not going to be a bottom 4 pick?
Yeah, well, and we talk about the dynasty arms race in the fantasy playoffs. You have some weapons now to go compete. Like if somebody has CeeDee Lamb on their roster and they're totally out of things, and you can send 2 1s and Marquise Brown and another upside piece for CeeDee Lamb or something during the like, because you did this last year with me, right? Like you sent me a fairly decent, like overpay to some degree on a value standpoint, but to get Christian McCaffrey and to help you secure a championship, it makes it worthwhile. So if come week 14 or something, you need to use both of those 2 first to make sure that you win the fantasy championship again, that definitely totally adds up to me as a move that I'm willing to make.
And the funny thing last year is I ended up making the move. So basically, if you guys are unfamiliar with the trade, it was 107 Travis Etienne and a future 25-2, I believe, for McCaffrey and Adams. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's like in that week, that was the week that McCaffrey got hurt. So he did worse than Travis Etienne. But I'm pretty sure the saving grace of that week, I don't exactly remember his stat line, but I'll say Devontae Adams had like over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns that week.
Yeah, he had a monster game. I mean, I eventually took that 107 and 25 second and traded up for Jaden Daniels, and then I eventually just swapped Jaden Daniels for Drake May in a different trade. So yeah, that was essentially what I got out of it, because ETN and Drake May was, to me, a really good return out of Devontae Adams and Christian McCaffrey, and I'm still competitive with ETN and Drake May than I was before, and I was a lot weaker at quarterback than you were.
Yeah, so like overall, again, it absolutely, like if we're looking back on it from a value standpoint, you crushed it. But for me, knowing that I was paying up for championship point equity, I mean, he's not worth that now in terms of his valuation when I traded for him versus overall what he's going on the market right now. But Devontae Adams, I have it pulled up. In that game, 21 targets, 13 receptions, 126 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So he absolutely helped me win the championship. Let's just say that.
Unfortunately, you could have kept ETN, and he actually outperformed McCaffrey that week. So that's the unfortunate part of that. And you could have kept all your picks and still won the championship. But anyways, we got to the end of this video. This is Jake's final team here. Appreciate you guys for sticking around to the end. If you did, go down and leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. We got tons of other content on the channel. League-winning running backs video went up 2 days ago. We updated our Superflex rookie rankings yesterday as you guys are watching this. So definitely check that out if you still have rookie drafts coming up or if you're just excited for the season. Training camps, as we're recording this today, are officially open for every NFL team, rookies and veterans. So we are off and running. Make sure you're following us over on TikTok because I do all the fantasy news of the day to keep you guys updated on that stuff. And our draft guide is updated with news of the day blurbs so that you can track and keep track of, this year's Puka Nacua and all the guys that are getting all the buzz. So definitely check all that stuff out. Again, if you want to be part of these episodes, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE users get to skip the line. Mother Flocker users get to go right to the front and get their teams broken down in the very next video that we do. So with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.